Let's go right ahead. Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. We have Hannah Sward here today to tell us a little bit about writing and the craft of writing. And first of all, when you're asked to appear at places, your memoir is so interesting. Are you ever asked to talk about the craft of writing, or do people want like all the down and dirty stuff?
Mostly about a lot of it depend. I mean, I've done a lot of recovery-oriented interviews and podcasts, and that's very centered on the recovery aspect of it. Mostly, it's not so much about the content, actually. It is more about the themes in it, such as loneliness and addiction, and yes, the sex work, but craft is a little more unusual, though just recently I've been invited to talk about the craft on many more literary podcasts. And that's always my favorite, writing. I'm talking about the writing aspect. And so again, thank you, Timothy, for inviting me. I know a couple of you have read the book, Barbara and Margie. Thank you. It's always an honor when somebody, out of all the books in the world, chooses to read a book. So Timothy, do you start?
Okay. Yeah, I guess what I would like to say is your book is the chapters are so short and concise. So was that planned, and also your writing education, when you first started your education in writing, how much had you written before that? How did it shape you, and just how did it apply to everything that you've done?
Great, I love that question. Again, I mean, it is my favorite thing to talk about is writing. So for those of you who don't know, this was my debut memoir. It came out about 16 months ago, Strip, a memoir. And it's, like I said, my debut book, so my first book. And before that, I had been writing. I grew up with a poet father, so I was always writing, but I always say this, I never wanted to be a writer. However, I was always writing. And I first began, and then I began to realize that I was a writer and that I started sending out stories probably when I was about 28, so quite a long time ago. And that was really fun. I made a game of it. I was like, okay, this year I'm going to get 100. I don't call them rejection letters. I like to use the word motivation letters. I've used that word for about 20 years. And so my goal was to collect 100 motivation letters. So I kind of had this, I knew that was, I had this example of my father. My mom always said my father was the king of rejection. So I had been writing and publishing. I went to school in the midst of my addiction to Antioch to finish my bachelor's. And for many years, I was taking writing workshops in Los Angeles, many classes at UCLA Extension and even Santa Monica College and Beverly Hills Adult School. And I loved it. I was very fortunate with all the teachers I had for the most part, and the generosity of feedback. And I started out with the basics, introductory classes. I still feel like I can benefit from those. It's still, when I come back to the page, it's the blank page and it feels like an introduction. I'm like, how do I do this? Can I do this? And so with my writing, so with this book, as Timothy said, it's written in, I'll show you an example. So the first chapter is that long. So there's many chapters that are, and that would be the second chapter. So there's many short chapters. Now, for me, with the craft of it, I was thinking about this last night. And it really, especially like when I'm thinking about what I'm working on right now and where I get stuck, it's like I try to tell the story in my head before I put the pen down. That freezes me up. What I need to do is remember, it's like a puzzle. I need to have all the pieces first before I arrange them. And oftentimes that puzzle, there's pieces that don't belong, there's pieces, but I get ahead of myself. The first part is getting that content down. So I'm very big on, and this doesn't work for everybody, it's just how I do it. I am very big on, I write everything first drafts, all in my, handy dollar store journal. Nothing fancy, because then I feel like I have to write something fancy and good. So I love my dollar store journals, and I write pen to paper. I feel like I don't censor myself as much when I do that. So I began this book in about 12 years ago, and I wrote for 2 years pretty much without stopping in those notebooks. And then I went back in and transcribed. And when people ask about the form with the short, almost poetic like chapters, or were almost like microfiction often, that wasn't how I started it. So craft comes to me. Craft is something with every essay, I'm not quite sure. It's not like I don't think about craft in the beginning. That's later. As you all probably know, there's so many ways of doing it. This particular way is an organic way that took many years, because I didn't know, even though it's a memoir, I didn't know the story that I wanted to share, even though it was my story, right? I still didn't know what that story was. So when I went back in to start transcribing, I see your, yes, and I want to get to that, Timothy. When I first started transcribing the book, it was one long sentence, the whole book. It was out of breath, and I was in a place within myself where I could hardly sit down to write, because I was coming from a place of having used crystal meth for a decade, so it was very hard to sit. So it was like, and, there were so many ands. Then going back in and starting to take out like what's going on here. For me, that's the hardest part, is the actual crafting of it, the weaving it together, what belongs, what doesn't. And form came, and I played around with tenses, with first person, second person, third person. And I'll say this too, that as an experiment, after this book I set it aside for a while, I wanted to see what it would be like to write a book with structure, to start with an outline. And I will say that is a lot easier. That was easier. So I do want to my intention with this time that we have is I really want to make it as helpful as possible to all of you. I want to cater it to, what do you want to know? What's going to be helpful to your own writing that I can share and inspire and give you some kind of walk away, right?
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, that's really where I want to focus on. I can continue talking about everything and anything.
So as you've gone through the motions, you've learned between the book that you've finished and the book you're working on now, what do you say is the most useful piece of writing advice for you? And what do you think is the biggest myth, or the least useful?
That you have to sit down for a long time and write and write and write. I started with, I was very scared to start writing again. And a mentor of sorts said 5 minutes a day. That I could do. I'm really big on consistency. And those 5 minutes added up to 2 handwritten pages a day. It didn't matter how long, it didn't matter what I was even saying, but just that I was pen to paper. It's the biggest thing I can say. And I say that to myself, and as a reminder to myself today, after here, I'm working on an essay and I'm scared. I don't want to go to it. Like, I have 27 pages of it. I'm like, what is going on here? I don't want to write this. I want to write anything but this. So the single most thing that was helpful for me in the beginning, and it was 5 minutes a day. The other is, it's from Natalie Goldberg, and it's not good. It's not helpful to everybody, but it helps me to remember to write the shittiest shit. Like, just write, like, get it out, right? And make it shit. Because for me, like, that helps me. I'm like, okay, I have room with that. And to get out of my own way. To really get, I find it harder when I'm writing, knowing that it's for a particular publication, getting out of my own way.
Okay, we have a question from Eric.
Yeah.
Yes, Hannah, very, very pleased to meet you.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, how you doing?
It's Hannah, by the way. So
Oh.
I'm stepping to do that because like people mispronounce my last name. I just let it ride because I don't want to be the one that says you mispronounced my name, because everybody should know my name. So it is Hannah. So I will do that legwork.
We know your name, but I have a last name. It's very easy to remember. It's like the Smith and Jones of Eastern Europe. But Jack Kerouac, who is also a meth addict, wrote On the Road in 1 or 2 nights on a scroll of like paper, like I guess back in the day when AP and UPI had these big rolls that they would feed in their machine. So he did that. And what I'm hearing from you is the question I have is, as you open up and give yourself, as you claim the right to write, right? At what point do you begin to see, hey, I might publish this, or this might be publishable? Or at what point, it's different for everybody, obviously, because, your mileage varies, but may vary. But at what point did that happen for you?
With the book, or with essays or short stories, or all of it?
Well, whatever you would like to talk about.
Okay. So that really varies. Sometimes I'm the kind of person, I really like to push myself in different forms. I had been invited, which is such an honor, to write an essay for the Rumpus, for example. So I knew that, and this is actually the essay I'm working on now, and I'm finding it very difficult. And when do I know? Oh, God. God, that's such a hard question. I'm not really sure. I really try. I get stuck when I start thinking about that it will be publishable. I really like to somehow just kind of keep that at bay. However, oftentimes it's so important for me to read it out loud to my writing group. That's when it comes alive, or that's when it falls flat and I can hear it. About a couple months ago, I was really going through a very, very difficult period with writing. I had been promoting the book pretty hard, and my focus was there. And I'll disclose that my father also passed around the time that my book came out. So I was it was a very tricky time. And I just put writing aside. I mean, it felt like a lot of writing with promoting the book, like a lot of work in writing in that area. However, my own writing, I didn't really for 1.5 years. And just a few months ago, I remember I had did a post and shared that I hated writing. I never wanted to write again. Like, I'm done. I hate this, and I've always hated it. And my sister reminded me that's not true. And I was like, it's not. And something shifted, and I came home one night, and I just wrote in my notebook, And I brought that as that draft to my writing group that Sunday. And when I read it aloud, they shockingly took I'm always shocked. I'm like, well, this is shit. And they said that you have to send this to the LA Times. I'm like, LA Times, they're not gonna, why would they write, what? They're not gonna publish a story about a meth addict, you know, getting out of bed. Like that was the whole essay. We're trying to get out of bed. And I sent it with no expectations. And so I when I heard it from them, I did know that it was publishable. I wasn't sure where, but I just decided to listen to them. And that essay did come out in the LA Times,
Yep.
shockingly to me, shockingly. However, again, so a long story thing, it often takes the form of I need to know from someone else. I guess I need that validation. It's not always the case. I've been very fortunate to work with some editors where I knew like that was a good fit for me.
I've got a few questions based on what you said. So you talked about a writing group. So what do you feel is a good, because this is a writing group here.
Yeah,
I'd like to
love it.
welcome the guests that logged in that aren't part of our writing group. You can always be a part of our writing group. You know, you can message me about that. But we meet every day. So what do you think is a good components of a writing group?
That is, I mean, I just love all these questions. That's a great question. So I've pretty much always been in a writing group, and I meet what works for me now is not always what worked for me. I am very big on what, not necessarily looking for, is this piece good or not, but a group that can offer, how can this piece be better? What can make this piece stronger? And asking questions. Recently in my writing group, there was a dynamic where it wasn't like that. And someone left and they didn't write for 2 weeks. And I took it upon myself to address this. That's not like, never should, I don't ever want to feel that way. I never want to make someone else feel that way. So the components are questions, how can we approach this piece and make it stronger? Very big on the accountability. So I'm actually, so for about 5 years, I had 2 writers and we had a 3-person writing group on Zoom. We started in the same city and we did it in person, but then it ended up on Zoom. And we knew each other's work implicitly. And that was so helpful. I had seen one author through 2 books that were very successful books. And so having that trust and being able to experiment and being able to jump into the group and share something, because it's such a vulnerable thing, right? So just recently I've formed a group in person and there's 5 of us. And not everyone likes this. And they don't all like it in the group, but I learned it from my father. A timer. I love a timer. I really think everyone should have the same amount of time. That feedback, it anchors the room, or in my experience. So we do 20 minutes each. You can read 3 pages, you know, that maybe take 10 minutes of feedback. It sounds a little rigid, but it's really worked for me. Yeah, I've been writing groups where it just feels so
So
I can't listen to this anymore and I don't want any more feedback myself.
So are certain people better at giving feedback than they are at writing? And are those the people you trust? And do you have one go-to person that knows your writing backwards and forward that always gets your work to review?
Yes, absolutely. That is not, she had a baby recently, so we are not working together, and it's been hard. It's been really hard. I really miss that group, and her in particular. No, I don't think, well, to someone, and thinking back to the teachers I had, No, I think someone can be a great writer and not be very helpful on feedback. You know, I feel like I do need to trust their writing, not just with my feedback, but what I'm hearing them share to other people. And I'm very careful with who I let read my work, or not let, but like, because I need to know where they're coming from.
Okay, what, I mean, your book is pretty much a no holds barred account. Do you feel that you need to put everything into it and just totally go for it, or what doesn't go in?
Oh my God, so much didn't go in. I mean, what can you fit into, I don't know, 250 pages? So much was taken out. In my case, like, again, like, what's the story I want to tell? What is the story? And what's taking away, like, my father, for example, was married 5 times. I only have 2 siblings in the book, but I have 6 other half siblings. They were edited out of the book. It got way too chaotic. And it was just like, it became all these other stories. And, you know, right now I'm working as a writing coach, and I have this one wonderful woman, and she brings this essay to the session. And I'm like, there's all these wonderful ideas in here. What is it? My dad would always say this: what is it you really want to say? That question. What is it you really want to say? I make it harder on myself bringing a number of different themes into an essay. So when I can narrow it down into like that, the essay that was for the, or not, that ended up in the LA Times, it was such a small little scene, so I can focus in. And that also helps me with getting back to the page, where I'm like, I'm just writing, getting out of bed. That's it.
Now, between your book that you published, that got published, and your next one, I'll ask the same question. What have you learned that won't go in this one? Did you have any, like, after Stripped came out, did you have any, like, oh my God moments? Something like this is never going to, how I wrote it, how I structured it, something like this is never going to go into any other book of mine.
No, I'm working on it. You know, right now I have a short story collection, so it's such a whole different thing. And a lot of those stories have already been published. Like, it's a whole different form, and it's new for me. And what wouldn't, I have to say, the publishing part of it, right now, I don't want to repeat what that experience was. Not right now, anyway. I don't want to, and this doesn't really, I don't know if this answers, it doesn't really answer your question, but for right now, I don't want to do the agent thing. I'm like, so it's less about the writing than what do I do and don't want to do. I don't want to write a fucking proposal. Like, I just don't want to do it, you know? And where is it that I want to put my energy? What's important to me? There's so many different ways to go with writing and publishing. What's going to nourish me? At a certain point with the agents and the publishing process, I'm like, this is not nourishing my soul.
All right, a couple questions. I'm gonna ask a quick one first. Maybe you can answer it quickly so we can get to Eric and Barbara. As a writer, do you focus on your weaknesses and making them better, or do you just stick and rely on your strengths when you do a first draft?
I stick with my strengths. I mean, it's pen to paper. My weakness is, my weakness is structure, and I find that that was the hardest part of this book, was the structure and connecting it. And I didn't think I could do it. Like, I knew I couldn't do it many times. I was like, I can't do it.
Okay, Barbara first, then Schary, then Eric.
Okay, now I need to remember my question. Oh, you were talking about, where is she? I can't see her. Full screen. You were talking about, don't laugh at me, Tim. You were talking about not wanting to write the proposal and to go the agent route and all of that stuff. How did you publish your first book, and how do you think you'll publish your second book? That's one question. And then my other question is, you know, I'm a huge fan and I love your book. As you were writing it and it was done, did you have a feeling it was going to be such a success as it is? Or was that a complete surprise to you? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So the first question just was,
How did you publish your first book?
yeah.
Did you have an agent, and how are you doing?
So I went through 2 different agents, and the first agent came through an essay I published with a literary journal in London, and that editor happened to be an agent, and he asked if I had a book. And we had a relationship, professional relationship for 2 years before he signed me. And I trusted him implicitly as an editor, or with his feedback. And so I had him, and then I went with a New York agent, and he had had his agency for 45 years. Really, I mean, it seemed like a really good fit. Right when he was going to start shopping it, he retired. And I mean, I had sent out, you guys, 150 query letters. You know, I had many manuscript requests. And however, just at that point, I was like, I was crushed, absolutely crushed. I'm like, you know, it was such a hard decision too, because I was like, I was getting a lot of response from agents, but I'm like, I just don't want to go through this again. I don't even want to send my manuscript even on request to any of these agents again. And so it was a very long journey. There was a small publisher that wanted to publish it. Fortunately, I did have an agent at that time that said no, which was odd. At AWP, I introduced myself last week to them after saying no. It was kind of weird, but I wanted to thank them and get a feeling for them for the next book. So I ended up with a small press publisher, and it was a very, very long journey. I didn't rush into anything. I'm someone that I called and connected with, which I'm very big on, the authors that did publish with this publisher. I wanted to know about their experience, and I was transparent with that with the publisher. I'm going to contact your, you know, and it was a very hard process, very hard decision. Do I want to do it exactly like that again? No. I'm not sure how I want to do it. And now I forget your second question. Oh, about the success. I mean, oh my God, Barbara, I don't even know if my book has been a success. It depends on which day you ask me, right? Like, it depends really where I am within myself. If sometimes I feel in a place of utter lack and I'm like, nothing's happened, which is not the truth. So it's kind of like on more of a spiritual level. Am I spiritually fit? Am I able to look at this from a place of abundance? Right now, for many reasons, I'm in a place of where I've been so fortunate. You know, it doesn't necessarily, like, I don't even know what the numbers are. My publisher hasn't said, but in terms of the connection in the community and the amount of things I've been invited to, you know, someone reached out to me on social media the other day saying, oh, I need to have a lesson on you, how you made all these events happen. I didn't make them happen. They're cultivated over many periods of reading other people's books, of contacting, like, the whole community. So in many senses, it's been an organic process, right? I mean, I haven't pitched one podcast. That's just not something I did once, and it wasn't a good podcast for me. It didn't go well.
Okay, we'll go to Schary next.
Well, first, thank you for being here. I have not read your book. I think Barbara asked the same question I was going to ask. I'm nowhere near ready to even think about book proposals, but that was also the question. The thought of a book proposal is just something that it's like going to work. It's like I couldn't even imagine even doing a book proposal. So that somewhat answered the question. I guess my next question then would be, you had a finished manuscript when you developed the relationship with the agents, I suppose, which is something I do not have yet, a finished manuscript. I have bits and pieces of chapters all over my computer. And like you, this book is taking years. I started it like 10 years ago. And it's a slow go. So in terms of finding an agent, did you in fact then had a finished manuscript to then present to agents?
So the first agent I didn't, he asked if I did. And at that point I said I was working on one. I didn't send him the first draft for about a year and a half. And then I sent it to him, and I didn't actually sign with him until, yeah, it was in good shape, which took a few more years. And with the second one, yes, I did have a manuscript that, in looking for an agent, often they send the proposal. Other times they don't. My proposal was a London agent thought it was fine, a New York agent thought it was fine, but it really wasn't strong. I've seen other ones and much stronger. It just wasn't. And also I didn't have an outline. Oftentimes they want an outline. I wasn't going to do a goddamn outline when I already had the book. Like, I was just like, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna, and just not, there were certain things I wasn't willing to do.
Yeah, I mean, my book went through the same route. I knew that Joe was good. I thought it could be represented by an agent. And after a year and a half, I was just like, I've got a small press publisher that publishes everything that I do, but I don't want them either. I want to like earn this one. And so it
Why
worked.
didn't you want them?
I mean, I love the small press.
But why didn't you want the one that you, I guess that's the separate question for later.
Oh, because she said Big Table, she's a huge fan of my writing. She said, I will publish everything that you do. And I guess I felt like, you know what? If I didn't get an agent, I wanted an outside eyes on this to basically validate what I feel about the book, if that makes sense.
Of course, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, let's move to Eric's question.
Oh, is it in the chat?
No, the question I have for Eric is, why can't you unmute? Okay, there he is.
That's
Oh.
it's powerless over me, but Groucho Marx said, not be a member of any club that would have me as a member or something like that. So I hear, Anna, from you, how it's really important to protect your boundaries, especially when it comes to the publishing community. I have a novel that's kind of basically a whole bunch of pieces on my computer, and putting it together is about as much fun as giving birth to a baby. And I want that at some point. You mentioned the organizational process. You've touched on that, and how along the lines, of writing a large full-length manuscript, which is, it's intimidating.
Very.
It really is. So what I received some pretty good advice, not from a writer, but someone I knew, who said, well, if I encounter an overwhelming problem, I just break it down into small pieces until I can find something that I can manage. But that doesn't really talk to the big picture. So how do you work with that, if you understand the question?
Unfortunately, I understand very well. I had about 100 different documents on my computer. Oh, this chapter, it was just a disaster. What felt like a disaster to me. I just thought and again, the doubt that I could do it. What it entailed for me, I just simply, and it's not so simple, had to sit with it. I had to sit with it and start linking them together, even if it was going to be a big mess, which it was, but starting to connect the dots, right? Like, it's interesting to see the book as it is now. I'm like, well, that all makes sense, right? But I didn't know that. So I started, you know what, Eric, what I started doing is making all these little documents that were tight in themselves. And then I started connecting them. And many of the documents didn't make it into the final thing. Some did, and they needed to be expanded on or edited. But I worked, and this is one of the reasons why I love short stories and working in the short form. I never, like I said, wanted to write a book, definitely not a memoir, not a full-length book, but contained chapters, so to speak. So and there's also, it is also can feel for me like I'm like, well, wow, that's a long process then, because I'm worked for 2 months on like these 3 chapters and they're not in the book now. Nothing's lost, right? Like I remember writing this essay or this short story for UCLA extension class 20 years ago. That chapter, that story ended up in the book. I didn't know it was going to be, but I was looking through how to link them, and I thought, wait, oh my God, I already have this written. Like you don't know where your work is going to end up, and that also speaks to the writing group. Like this writing group at that particular group did not like this story. I had tears. I'm still friends with the professor, tears on the manuscript. And he slid a paper to me, said, don't listen to anyone. So, I mean, just a word on sometimes outside feedback that, I had one agent that was interested, and we met for coffee. We had, it was a great connection. I mean, seemed like a great connection. Then I sent her the next draft, and it was like she didn't, I mean, my writing was the same. It was like I met with a different woman, and she was just like, you need to go take lessons. And it was crushing. I was like, I'm the same writer.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go
my
ahead.
experience too is I think I had to fail at writing a novel before I could write my first novel. And how I failed at my first one was organizational, that the whole thing wrapped up at 19,000 words, and you can't exactly use 40,000 words of filler for the 19,000 words of text. So I learned that. But the character in that novel was Lucky, and Lucky's in what I'm writing now. So there is some redemption in saving stuff. Eric, did you have a follow-up? Because Margie's up.
I just want to, I'll defer to Roger. I just want to say that sometimes I call it going back to the wood shop, and then seeing maybe there's like a spare piece of something here. Oh yeah, well this might fit. Oh yeah, what was I doing with that? And then begin honing that piece into something else. That's how I had a poem published that way. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Margie, what do you got, Margie? Question.
I was just wondering about the value of the MFA, getting an MFA. I mean, I know it doesn't make the work any easier getting it down, but do you feel like it comes? I mean, I know the more you write, the easier it comes, kinda sometimes, but
I wish.
yeah.
So to clarify, I didn't get an MFA. I got my bachelor's, and
Okay.
so my decision to not get an MFA was, well, one, financial. It's definitely a luxury. I loved going back to school as an older adult. I loved every class I took, which many of them were not writing related. At that point, I was just like, I want to utilize learning about whales, what good that was, or philosophy, things that were never going to serve me. But I think there is value in it. I do. I think those relationships that are built. However, I was talking with someone that recently graduated from a MFA program. She's about my age, and she thought it was about community until she graduated, and she said it hasn't been supportive. So I hear different things. However, I do think cultivating that community, I can't imagine. And also actually, I don't think you always have a published manuscript at the end. I'm not sure. Like I'm mentoring one woman, and she got a full ride to USC. And I get chills about this, still thinking about it, and she's about to finish her MFA. I think I'm not sure like what that's gonna be, but I do know that it's helped her complete sense of self,
Okay.
right? I don't think you, I mean, I don't know, like, I guess it depends on what your intention is.
Everyone that I know with MFA no one has made their money back from the investment of an MFA, but every single one of them has become a better writer. So that's sort of the give and take.
And that sounds great. Like, how fun is that to go to school and be with other writers and writing and getting feedback and giving feedback and yeah.
Paula, you had a question.
Two questions, actually. The first question is, what is your writing rhythm? Do you find that you are more productive in the mornings, in the evenings? So what is your writing rhythm? And then the final question is, what is your advice to first-time writers? Do you advise that they try to find an agent or that they publish themselves, self-publish?
I love all these questions. Thank you, guys. Well, that's not politically correct. Thank you, people. No, I'm just blanking. I just blanked. Paula. Wait, what was the first question?
What is your writing rhythm?
Oh, right, my rhythm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's something, right? So I went through a period where I was really struggling emotionally. And so I was like, okay, I need to have a morning routine. And so right now what that looks like is I have my like morning kind of spiritual practice, and then I come to the journal or notebook and I write. And it doesn't have to be necessarily about what I'm really working on, right? Like this morning I wrote, and I just find like that morning practice is so important. And I would say mornings and daytime, like my hope is to write this afternoon. I don't know. But if I wait till evening, that doesn't feel so good for me. I do know my father was big on the evening. I would email me at 85 years old. I'd see an email come in about a draft that he was working on at 2 a.m. So he said it was very quiet then. But I do like to get into it in the morning. Yeah. Not at 6 a.m. though.
Gotcha. And then the second part was, what is your advice to first-time writers? Do you encourage them to self-publish or to try to seek out a publisher or a boutique?
Yeah. God, that's so hard. It really depends on what it is you want. Like what do you want, and where again do you want to put your energy? Self-publishing, I think it's wonderful. I also think it can be challenging in that it's harder to get reviews like for perhaps like the trades. That's my knowledge of it, like Booklist or Kirkus. And those are important in terms of getting into bookstores. Even with a small press author, it was not that easy. Oh, someone's calling me. The MFA student just called. Sorry, name. The MFA student. It's a very hard question. It's just there's so many routes to go, right?
So can you talk about the pros and cons? What are the pros of self-publishing versus a boutique versus a big-time publisher?
Well, I don't have experience with a big-time publisher. There's there's the big five that, in my experiences, you have to have an agent. And with a small press, the advantage is you have a built-in editor because they'll edit it. And not charge you, although some of them do charge you. I said no to one press because they seemed reputable, but they were going to charge me for copy editing. I'm like, I'm not going to pay you know, if I'm going to go with a publisher. I think it's very tricky right now because there's a lot of publishers and really what I think of as scams. Like I know personally people who have used, like it's really got to be so careful. With the self-publishing, it's all your self-promotion. You got to be on it. If that's your goal to have readers, right? It could not be. But the same is true with the small press. My publisher did zero in terms of promoting my book. So, you know, and I've heard of self-published authors, as I'm sure you all have, that have been successful, right? Again, I think it comes down to what do you want? That was the question that kept coming back to me. I was like, what is it do I want? And where do I want to invest my time? I personally think shooting for an outside publisher, at least first, give yourself a shot versus self-publishing. Give yourself the shot.
All right. We have a question from Emmy award-winning writer Ray Goodrich. How's that, Ray?
Wow, that was a nice setup, Tim. Thank you. And Hannah, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate you joining our group today. I actually have a question for you, but I have another question based on what you just said first. You said your publisher did not promote your book. Did you know that going in, that they weren't going to promote it?
I did, because I did the research. I'm very big on research and not jumping into decisions.
Gotcha.
Which I'm going through now. That publisher wants to read my short story collection. That's very enticing. I want that. I want to see what do I have here. I just don't know if I want to have that experience again.
Is that something you can negotiate, or it's just black and white? They either promote it or they don't.
And you could try to negotiate. Yeah, he was going to have a publicist, one of his on, and I was just like, yeah, you could try, but a small post, they only have so much time and resources. And, you know, I think one of the things that I would like to try is a university press next, but I also hear mixed things about that. I think it's very important to talk to other authors about their experience. You know, I still had illusions that, well, even though this publisher didn't promote other people, and they didn't come out and say it just like that. They were very tactful and like, you know, that he's a nice guy, he's great, you know, he picks great, like all these things, but it could also be like, oh, okay, you're on your own. That I hear is also the truth, or not the truth, similar to big publishers, but my experience of my friends who've published with big publishers, they seem like they have a little bit more, you know, and also credibility. For me to get into bookstores, I've been very fortunate. However, it can be very challenging because you don't have the stamp of the big publisher, right? Like when I was setting up readings, they'd be like, you're with a small press, we don't want you, essentially. That's really disheartening, very disheartening. And I'm not going to pay to be at a bookstore.
Yeah. Okay, here's my actual question. Can you distill for us your draft process? I've written a work of fiction. I finished the first draft. Thank you. I'm currently in the second draft, and Tim has been very, very key in helping me sort of, as a first-time fiction writer. As he mentioned, I wrote for television for years, but as a first-time novel writer, I'm sorting out the drafting process of what goes into each draft. And I know it's different for every reader or every writer, but can you sort of distill that down for, okay, here's what I do in my first and my second, my third, and how many do you do?
Yeah, mine was a lot of drafts. I mean, like someone had read it this morning and they messaged me on social media showing me a paragraph saying how much like they just were laughing out loud. And I'm like, I don't even remember writing that at this point. I'm so like bored. And just anyway, that aside from your question, the first draft is get it out. You get and you've done that, right? The second one was, at that point, I had that agent I could send it to, and I sent it to him. So I need a pair of eyes on it. Like, for example, right now with my short story collection, I've had no one read it straight through. One, I think it's a really big ask. I'm not someone that's just going to ask someone, and I also need to trust them. So a number of things. That feedback, right? Or to go back through it yourself and have that distance. The second draft for me was more about the structure. And then the third draft was again about the structure. And the fourth draft was again about the structure. And then it was, okay, what's really necessary? What can I pull out? What do I need to add? And yeah, and then in terms of the editing, the copy editing, the line editing, I mean, that's all later. I don't worry about that until later. Many drafts. I don't know if that answers it. I don't even have a concrete answer.
That does help. That does help. I appreciate that. Thanks.
I think the second draft really structure looking at it, because globally, like a global look at it.
Yeah, you do them until your publisher says don't do anymore, or you tell yourself to not do anymore, because it can be endless.
And even the publisher, I mean, I sent it, my best friend, she's a different race than me, and I'm so glad she read it, because she said, don't say that. Like it was just one line where I was like, oh, I thank God. Like it was, it wasn't minor. It was I didn't know as a white person that was not a good thing to say. So beyond my publisher, outside eyes of different sexualities, races, all of it.
All right. Well, we've got like 1 or 2 more minutes to go. If anyone has anything quick, just fire it out right now. Otherwise, we'll just thank you with all of our hearts for your time.
Oh my God, it's such an honor. I'm so grateful. I have so many questions for all of you about where you are with your work, and I love you guys meet 5 days a week.
We do.
That's crazy.
Can you tell me the structure of our group, Tim?
Structure of our group is.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear that, Barbara. Yes.
So Monday through Thursday, this is for you new people that are sitting in. Monday through Thursday, we meet at this time. We do a quick 5 to 10 minutes check-in. What are you working on today? Do you have any issues with your writing? And also, we've become great friends. They're like, how's your dog? Is your dog back from the vet? Stuff like that. And then we check in, and then we turn the cameras off and we write for 50, 55 minutes, and we do another check-in to be accountable for our time. And on Fridays, we have special lessons like we have today. We have reading out loud, which was mentioned as really important, and mild feedback from reading out loud. And then we have a full critique Friday, which is you submit, when it's that turn and that Friday, you submit up to 3,000 words and you get a full critique by members of the group. And that's really
fascinating. I love that. What an incredible group you guys
come join us.
Yeah, come join us anytime.
And the other thing we do goals like every quarter. We have a goals meeting, which a lot of folks really like to avoid, but we do it. So
that's what at my old group we would do intentions. What's your intention for the week? And then we would text each other a lot during the day, like just no response necessary, but doing 5 minutes, or submitting to this place. And also I'll also say it's really fun to kind of sometimes send out pieces for to journals that you like. It a little validation. It's nice to kind of see where your work may or may not land, but that's something I'd like to do. Yeah.
Also, some of the things that we discuss in group is promoting before the book comes out, promoting after the book comes out. There's a whole lot of things, and also like how important it is to have like a team that when the book is released can get out and do the readings and pop the reviews up on day one. So we And everyone in this group has sort of become an expert on nearly all of those things. And, you know, we started meeting in 2020 because, you know, what else are you going to do during the pandemic? And, you know,
That's absolutely incredible that you guys do that. I wish I had known that. I didn't know that pre-order were important. I don't know how I didn't know that. And also, as I said, you know, my father passed around, you know, pre-order time, and it just wasn't on my radar. I just posted something the other day sharing with some writers that seemed discouraged. I think I might have had 0 pre-orders. I just share that as, I'm not sure why.
Well,
But
it's too-
I guess the point is your book can also be still, you know, have traction if there's no pre-orders, but unfortunately I didn't know that about 0. So that's great. You guys
Found that
know.
out. I'm very glad I found this group. I'm grateful to Tim and grateful to everyone here. As I you know, and I'm a newbie, so I'm getting to know people and they're getting to know my work, and as we go, you know, I don't think there's any one piece of writing, one published piece of writing that happened just, you know, just by someone sitting in a contorted position in an attic writing, maybe Emily Dickinson, but you know, nobody, it takes a team. It takes getting it out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I say something really fast?
Yeah.
I just want to say that this group has so much knowledge and so much compassion for each other, and Tim is amazing. Tim has taught us so much. I just appreciate this group. I wrote 2 books here with these people, and I would not have been able to get through it without them. So thank you, Tim.
And thank
Keeping
you.
us together.
Really important too, and I think Hannah exemplifies this. Sometimes, like when people write and they finish books or they have a certain level of writing, they become real dicks. And it's really, really important to always give back to the community, always support writers, no matter what you perceive their level as, because there's a lot of leveling in the writing community. And the more you're around writers or areas like Boston or that have writers, the more you're going to see that. And like if you can just, you know, give your kindness and your kind hand to other writers, you can go like so far for like, you know, for them. And that's really important.
That is true. That is very true. And yeah, and it can also be snooty. People ask me, well, who's your publisher? I'd say Tortoise Press, and they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and I've read their book, and I can't say I liked it with their big press. So anyway, that's
Exactly.
If I could approach, if I might ask Tim, if it's all right, if I can ask Hannah, if you would be comfortable sharing your information. I don't want to burden you or anything, but
of course, absolutely. And I think I've seen, yes, I'll put my, oh yeah, I see your message about the podcast. Yeah, so here's my email.
thank you. Thank you. That's great. A wonderful having you. Wonderful hearing.
Thank you so much. That's you, and thank you, Timothy. Which do you guys go by? I should know this.
Either's fine. And neither of them are my first name, but that's the other thing. We weren't going to tell you about the swear tip jar when you swear, but like that is a group joke and a group thing. So Paula,
My Cash App.
how
My
much
Cash App is
Hannah
$.
That's how she self-published, Hannah.
Exactly.
Do I have like 3 strikes against me?
Oh man, I think you're up to about $30.
You know,
And
as
I
I
can use the money.